Welcome to Suburban Death Metal Dad Recommends, episode 26, Iron Maiden. So this video I have divided into 4 parts. Part 1 will be the 80s, Part 2 will be the 90s to the present, Part 3 will be me showing some stuff from my collection, and Part 4 will be my dream set list and some of my favorite live albums. And when I talk about the albums, I'm going to comment on the artwork as well as basically pick 3 of my favorite songs from the album. I just wanted to start the video by mentioning that Iron Maiden will be reaching 50 this year, and I will also be reaching 50 this year. So just want to make a note of that, that the bands have been around for going on 50 years, which is pretty incredible. Steve Harris being the sole remaining original member. And just, to me, Steve Harris is the metal god. And don't see why that can't be more than one, but I'll just say that for me, if I had to pick who I thought the metal god was, it would be Steve Harris. And reason being just for how long he's been around. Iron Maiden's been around and just never compromised, never bowed to trends, never followed trends, just did their own thing on their own terms and became very successful without compromising. And I think the band has incredible integrity. So just wanted to make that comment before I get into the video. But I first became aware of Iron Maiden probably around 1983, give or take. And it was maybe a year or so before that I became a music fan to the point of going to the record store and buying some cassettes. And it started with 80s pop music, some rock music, stuff I heard on the radio basically. Nobody really introduced me to any bands or anything around that time. It was just hearing the radio and being like, okay, yeah, I'm interested in music, and never looked back. But anyway, I became aware of Iron Maiden basically from seeing the LPs in the record store in the mall or the small music sections that some department stores had. I remember seeing the LPs on the wall on display and just being really captivated by Iron Maiden's LP covers, whether it was The Number of the Beast or Killers or Peace of Mind. And I had no clue what the band sounded like or even what type of music they played, just that it looked very interesting, and I was definitely curious about it. And I don't remember a lot of bands, especially going back this far, like the exact moment when I heard them first, but for Iron Maiden, I do know it was December 25th, 1985, and I had picked out a couple of cassettes that I wanted, and starting with Power Slave, and a pretty cool album cover, I think, the Egyptian theme. And this was the first one I heard because I remembered hearing Aces High as the first song I heard, and that's definitely a favorite of mine, as well as Back in the Village and the title track. I was just blown away. Just, it was like nothing I'd heard before. The music, the vocals, the complexity of it, just having listened to a few other heavy metal bands here and there prior to that and hard rock. So Iron Maiden was like nothing I'd listened to before, and I was just really sucked in and became obsessed with the band from that point. And the other one I got on that day was Peace of Mind. Pretty cool album cover, Eddie in the Straight Jacket, and definitely a fan favorite. Great songs on this one, like the opener, Where Equals Dare, Still Life, I like that one a lot, and Revelations. So not a bad way to start listening to Iron Maiden with these two. So going into 1986, I don't remember exactly in what order I got the rest of the albums, but so I'll just go through them based on when they were released. So starting with the debut album in 1980, album cover's okay, not one of my favorites, but some really great songs on this one, like Strange World and of course Phantom of the Opera and the instrumental Transylvania. So it's a pretty strong debut. I will say when I first heard, it was either the debut or Killers. I don't remember which one I got first, but I had no idea that there was a different singer. Didn't know anything about Paul Di'Anno. So imagine my surprise. I listened to the album and it's a different singer. But I like Paul Di'Anno very much. Of course, he just passed away not long ago. But he definitely left his mark with Iron Maiden and Killers. This is one of my favorite albums by the band overall, and the artwork too I like a lot. And just for me, this album from start to finish is a great one. Favorite songs being Innocent Exile, Purgatory, Murders in the Rue Morgue. Just a great album from the band, and their first with Martin Birch producing. All right, so next up is The Number of the Beast from 1982, the first one with Bruce on vocals. Totally killer and classic heavy metal album, and fantastic artwork here, and killer songs like the title track, Children of the Damned, and Hallowed Be Thy Name. Definitely can't go wrong with The Number of the Beast. All right, next up is Live After Death from 1985, and this artwork is absolutely killer, one of my favorites. And the album itself, of course, is also a great live album, not just for Iron Maiden, but just heavy metal in general, just one of the classics. All right, next up is Somewhere in Time, released in 1986. So I remember seeing advertisements for this because it wasn't out yet when I was already a fan, so that was kind of cool. It was the first album that wasn't out that I was anticipating, and I like the album cover a lot. Very detailed, very cool, and great songs on this one, like the opener, Caught Somewhere in Time, of course, Wasted Years, and another favorite of mine is Sea of Madness. But overall, very cool, and a lot of synthesizers, very heavy in the mix on this one, but not in a cheesy way, I don't think. I think it still sounds really good, even with the synthesizers. I think they did it very well. All right, last one for the 80s, 1988, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Once again, the artwork, one of my favorites. Obviously, I like a lot of them, but this one's very cool. And also the album, one of my favorites, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Just very consistent, very cool theme throughout. I like it a lot. And just the songs are great. The Evil That Men Do, total classic. And Infinite Dreams, Moonchild. Just overall, really great album in my opinion, and a great way for the band to cap off the 1980s. So that's the 1980s, and such a successful and golden period for the band, I would say. Just the sheer number of albums and quality albums that they released between 1980 and 1988 is very impressive. And yeah, there's not a bad album in that decade, in my opinion. So the 90s were definitely a lot different than the 80s. And starting with Adrian Smith had left the band and was replaced by Yannick Gers. And I remember seeing the Tattooed Millionaire video from Bruce's debut solo album, and which Yannick Gers was a member, and just not really being a fan of that at all. Didn't do anything for me. And then also in 1990, Iron Maiden had released No Prayer for the Dying, and the first thing I heard and saw was the Holy Smoke video, and I just remember not really being into it that much, especially having been such a fan of Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, and then hearing Holy Smoke just didn't do much for me, and I did not pick up the album at that time. Ended up picking it up around 2010, so about 20 years later, actually. And now it's an album that I actually like quite a bit. Artwork's okay, not that great, but it's okay. And like I said, now I'm a fan of this album. I listen to it quite often, actually. Favorite songs being Public Enema Number One. Not a great song title, but it's actually a very killer song. Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, and Holy Smoke. I like it more now than I did then. So then in 1992, the band released Fear of the Dark, and This one also, I remembered seeing the video for Wasting Love and thought it was not that good, didn't like it, didn't pick it up. Album artwork's pretty cool. Um, Ended up picking it up later, around the same time that I picked up No Prayer for the Dying. Like I said, maybe it was like 2010 or something. And I don't like this one as much as I like No Prayer for the Dying. But I do like the songs Afraid to Shoot Strangers, Be Quick or Be Dead, Childhood's End. So it's still okay. Like I said, there's songs in here I like. So then, eventually, after Fear of the Dark was released, Bruce Dickinson ended up leaving Iron Maiden and wanted to get his solo career going. And then they replaced him with Blaze Bayley. And then in 1995, they released The X Factor. And I don't even remember that I heard anything from this when it came out. It wasn't until years and years later, um, like the previous two albums, that I picked this one up. I still don't really care for it that much. The artwork is not good. I don't like it. I like the song Man on the Edge, but other than that, I don't really care for it. And then in 1998, the band released Virtual 11, and I don't even own that one. I just never picked it up. I did hear and see the video for The Angel and the Gambler. I think that's that one and Future Real because it's on a compilation. Those two I've heard, and I don't really like them all that much. Future Real was kind of okay, but The Angel and the Gambler with those keyboards or synthesizers, I didn't like that at all. I think that's not that great. So, yeah, for me, the 90s for Iron Maiden at the time just wasn't really following them. Picked up, like I said, these albums years and years later with the lineup changes and, Bruce and Adrian being strong songwriters, I would say had an effect on the band in the 90s. So it wasn't until 1999 when the band um, announced that Adrian and Bruce were returning that I got excited again. And because I'd heard Bruce's solo album, Chemical Wedding, a friend of mine had said, "Hey, you need to check out the Chemical Wedding," which was released in 1998. And he said it's better than anything Iron Maiden's been releasing. So I checked it out, and he was definitely not wrong. That is a killer album. If you haven't heard that, Accident of Birth is pretty good too. That also has Adrian on guitar. So in 2000, Iron Maiden released Brave New World, and I do like this one a lot. And the album artwork I think is pretty cool with Eddie's face in the sky and that futuristic city there. And songs on this one I like a lot. Dream of Mirrors, Out of the Silent Planet, The Thin Line Between Love and Hate. Just very strong comeback, if you want to call it that. I'll say comeback with Bruce and Adrian. And basically set the band off on another successful trajectory, in my opinion. So in 2003, Iron Maiden released Dance of Death. And I think Eddie looks pretty cool on this album cover, but everything around him, not so much. And I don't like this album as much as Brave New World, but good songs on this one: Dance of Death, the title track, No More Lies, and Passchendaele. So it is a pretty good album, just not one of my favorites. But then in 2006, the band released A Matter of Life and Death, and I do like this one a lot. Probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite album they've released since 2000. And just overall, I like all the songs. Favorites being Different World, the opening track, Lord of Light, Out of the Shadows. Just for me, I think it's a pretty strong album. I like the production a lot on it. Not that there's a big difference between productions on the albums that they released from 2000 onward, but and the artwork too. I like the artwork on this one a lot too. I think it's pretty cool. And I remember the band, and it might have been the first time they had done this, and a lot of fans were not happy, I guess, but for some of the shows at least, they played the entire album front to back, which I would have liked to have seen that. But yeah, so like I said, one of my favorites. Then in 2010, the band released The Final Frontier. The artwork on this one's okay. I do like Eddie being in space, but I don't really like this version of Eddie. And songs I like on this one: The Talisman, Star Blind, When the Wind Blows. Not one of my favorites, but there's some songs on here I really like a lot. in 2015, the band released their first double album, The Book of Souls. Don't really care for this Eddie, but I remembered seeing some reviews online, and I don't remember the publications off the top of my head or anything like that. But this album gets a lot of praise, and I did see some reviewers, at least one I remembered, said this was the best album Iron Maiden has ever done, which is just an opinion. If that's your opinion, that's fine. But for me, it doesn't match up to anything from the 80s. It's still not a bad album. Favorite songs on here being the opening track of Eternity Should Fail, which Bruce wrote for his solo band, and Speed of Light, not too bad. Death or Glory, like that one. Just overall, not one of my favorites. There's very good songs on it, but like I said, just not one of my personal favorites. And in 2021, the band released another double album, Senjutsu, and I do like the artwork on this one quite a bit. I think it's pretty cool, and good songs on this one like Lost in the Lost World, Stratego, Days of Future Past. So I think it's a fairly strong album. I like it better than the Book of Souls, and hopefully Iron Maiden will release at least one more studio album, if not many more. So I'm definitely looking forward to the next release, whenever that might be. All right, so I want to show some stuff from my collection. Not everything, of course, just trying to stick with not necessarily considered rare or unique things, but not going to show everything I have, like every single CD or anything like that, but some of the stuff that maybe might be a little more unique. All right, so back in 2014, they released a collection of the 80s albums on vinyl in a set here, and yeah, it's really a nice collection to have, just black vinyl, but yeah, it's good to have this if you're a vinyl fan, and of course, a fan of the Iron Maiden albums from the 80s, like myself. So back in the 80s, there were these little pink characters called Muscle Men, and a few years ago, Super 7 released these Muscle Men characters, Eddie versions. There's 3 different Eddies in here, so kind of neat to have these. Eddie's Archive, released in 2002, and in this container you have a shot glass, a scroll with the lineup history of Iron Maiden along with CDs. There's BBC Live, Beast over Hammersmith, and Best of the B-Sides. So it's a pretty cool set to have. This is a bottle of the Iron Maiden Trooper Ale by Robinson's Brewery, and I picked this up maybe 10 years ago in Germany. It's the only place I've ever seen it, and it is pretty good. I'm not sure if it's distributed anywhere in the United States. I've looked from time to time here and there and have never seen it. Iron Maiden Monopoly game. I have not played it, haven't opened it, and but yeah, it looks like a pretty cool set. I just picked it up maybe a year ago. I have these cards I picked up maybe 15 years ago, and there's an envelope inside. Pretty neat, I guess. I don't know if I would ever send these out. Probably just keep them. It's a tour program from when I saw Iron Maiden in 2011 in London. History of Iron Maiden magazine with some guitar tabs in it. Official photo book by Ross Halfin. A couple of Iron Maiden VHS tapes, 12 Wasted Years and Made in England. It's been a while since I played these. I have these on DVD, so, but last time I looked at them, they played fine. A couple of Iron Maiden mug cups. I have more of these, but these are probably the 2 coolest ones I have, with Killers and the Number of the Beast. Iron Maiden does have quite a few DVDs. And these are the ones I have. Flight 666, Made in England 88, Raising Hell, In Vivo, The Number of the Beast, Visions of the Beast, Live After Death, Part 1, The Early Days, Death on the Road, and Rock in Rio. I do have a couple of 7-inches. These were put out in 2014. Twilight Zone with Wrathchild. And probably my favorite one, Purgatory with Genghis Khan. And I have to say, the Purgatory artwork is definitely my favorite Iron Maiden piece of artwork there is. Just fantastic. Back in the mid-90s, Castle Records put out some Iron Maiden releases as 2 CD sets with bonus tracks. And I have the majority of them. My favorite probably is Killers. And the reason being the bonus disc has the Made in Japan EP, the US version with 5 tracks, as well as the Women in Uniform single with Invasion, and also a version of Phantom of the Opera Live. So definitely like this one a lot. All right, another CD I have that I like a lot is the Can I Play with Madness and The Evil That Men Do singles together on one CD with bonus tracks from the Seventh Son of a Seventh Son session. And the highlights on here for me are new versions of Prowler and Charlotte the Harlot with Bruce on vocals. All right, the last thing I wanted to show was something that goes way back to the mid-'80s. I think I picked this up maybe in 1986, somewhere around there, not long after I discovered the band and became a fan. And I remember I got this in a grocery store, and it's a folder for papers, Power Slave. And I believe I had another one, a different version. I don't remember, maybe Peace of Mind or something. But this is the only one that survived after all those years. So definitely cool to be able to hang on to this. So before I get into the dream set list and favorite live albums, I just wanted to mention I have seen Iron Maiden live 3 times. And the first time was in 1987. They were touring for Somewhere in Time. And it was my first concert ever. So going to see Iron Maiden, like I said at that time, really obsessed with them. Just being 11 years old, of course, I needed a chaperone. And it was amazing, of course. And great memory for me. And second time was in 2000 when they were touring for Brave New World right after Bruce and Adrian returned to the band. Also a great concert. And the last time was in 2011. They were touring for the Final Frontier, and another great concert, and it was in London. And I remember Bruce mentioned during the concert that they didn't play there very often, even though it's their hometown. So it was a special gig for them and for me as well. So anyway, dream set list. I basically picked a song from every album except for Virtual 11, and just going in order, from the first album up to Senjutsu. So going with Strange World, Purgatory, Children of the Damned, Revelations, Back in the Village, Sea of Madness, The Evil That Men Do, Public Enema #1, Afraid to Shoot Strangers, Man on the Edge, Out of the Silent Planet, No More Lies, Lord of Light, The Talisman, If Eternity Should Fail, and Lost in a Lost World. So for me, that would be a really cool set list. And so I ended up going with 4 favorite live albums. They have quite a few actually, and the other ones are good too, but some of my favorite ones, and I'm going with first one here is actually an unofficial one. It's Iron Maiden, made in Japan, but it's a bootleg, and it's a full concert, unlike the Made in Japan EP. But it's got Paul Di'Anno on vocals, very cool, and sounds pretty decent. I like it a lot. All right, second one I'm going with, which I already mentioned, Live After Death, just a classic. The first official live album from the band, full-length album, and it's a pretty good one, no doubt, and a lot of classic tracks. Next up, Maiden, England, 1988. Of course, this was recorded when they were touring for Seventh Son of the Seventh Son, which I'm a big fan of that album. So, yeah, it's a good one. Great sound as well. And my final pick is Flight 666. And this is made up of mostly tracks from the 80s. Fear of the Dark is on here as well. So it's a really good set list and good sound. And this one actually, they took the songs from different shows when they were touring during that period. But still a really good one, and the sound is consistent throughout. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
The only place where you can